All right, what's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Peak podcast. And today's a little different because my incredible co-host cannot make it today. So it's going to be a solo hosting with myself, Oliver Wolf, and I have Quentin here as well. And so I'm going to get into his bio, but one of the things right off the bat I really appreciate about his bio and what he's doing is, and this is something that I love when I see any entrepreneur doing this, is it's very specific and niched. And I love to say that the universe loves specificity, and Quentin is definitely on that. And I imagine it's why he's going far. So I'll just jump into his bio right now. Quentin is a mindset and performance coach and founder and CEO of World Class. He's a former dual sport D1 athlete and Gator Bowl champion with a bachelor's and a master's degree from Northwestern University. His passion for supporting ex-athletes comes from his storied experience with the concussion crisis in sport. Having battled post-concussion syndrome for 6 years, the pivotal shift in his recovery came when he shifted his mindset from procrastinating and perfectionism to bold action and ownership of his identity. This subtle yet powerful shift is what he instills in clients today via one-on-one coaching, group programming, and large-scale trainings and workshops, preparing world-class athletes, bit of a tongue twister there, for world-class leaders. And so, Quentin, welcome to the podcast. Really appreciate you being here.
So pumped to be here, Oliver. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So like I said, right off the bat, I love the specificity. I really like that. It's like, I work with these kinds of people doing this kind of a thing. And that's great because it doesn't go with that whole shotgun approach. It's much more of a sniper rifle of like, I know exactly who I want to help and how I can do it. And that makes it easier for someone to self-identify as someone that can use your help. So I'd love to jump in to just create some context here. Basically, it's just really important for that is to understand a little bit more about your athletic career and how you led your team to its first bowl in 64 years. Can you share that story around that period of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to be very good at sports. You know, I learned that at a young age. I actually played 2 sports in college. I played football and baseball and finished out, most of my career just playing football. But I remember, and I bring this up a lot to my clients. I ask them, when did you realize you were good at sports? When did you realize this could be a thing for you? And often that's when a bit of our identity sort of shifts and a bit of our, sort of like seeking for approval or seeking for
your self-worth kind of thing.
Exactly. We start to identify as an athlete. And so that's when I was young. I was like 7 years old. I was throwing a baseball around at the first organized practice. And I remember the coaches coming behind me and kind of like stalking me, and they were all kind of huddled up, and they're like, "Oh, Quentin's got a good arm. Wow, okay, Quentin, do that again. Do that again." Like it was like I didn't know I had a good arm, but that was really the first instance where athletically I felt like I was getting attention, which was cool. Especially being the youngest of my whole family, of all my cousins and everything. Like to get that attention and that sort of acknowledgement was cool. So. It quickly but surely, it's the wrong way to say it, but it became a part of my identity. And I also realized I was a big kid, and I was also pretty good at football because I was big. And I wasn't really predicted to be a very good football player, but had a great growth spurt, and I ended up getting drafted out of high school to play baseball, ended up choosing to play 2 sports in college instead, and followed my brother to Northwestern, where we went to actually the first bowl games we had gone to in a while was first my freshman year. And then by the time I was a senior, we had gone to 5 straight bowl games, but we hadn't won one yet. And so this is our 5th bowl game straight, and this is my senior year. And it was really cool because we had finally switched our contract from Adidas to Under Armour. So we were wearing these really cool uniforms, like Northwestern.
Feel like a Marvel hero or something,
Right. And I actually have the jersey over here. I can show it a little bit. But like the Gator Bowl jersey and the Gator Bowl year just really signified a lot for everyone, because we had this proverbial monkey on our back of having the longest drought of any college team for bowl game losses. Like we hadn't won a bowl game in 64 years. The year prior, I was a starter, and we were trying to win that one, and finally we come around, and what was really cool about this game was I instinctually made what would be otherwise a bad play into a really good play. On the third play of the game, I instinctually, dropped back basically from my defensive end position, felt that the quarterback was about to throw the ball to the running back on the outside, and caught my third interception of the year, but the first one of the game, the third play of the game, and I scored a touchdown in that play, and that set the tone for our first bowl game.
Yeah, that's
win.
huge for momentum, man.
Yeah, it's huge, and so, I'm really proud of that performance. I had a great game. I had a chance to go and play professionally. I semi-pursued it. I knew I really wanted to use my education, and it was interesting too. We could talk more about this, but at the same time, I also learned a lot about what was going on in the concussion world, in the sports arena, when it came to head trauma. And so, and Oliver, I think you're muted for some reason.
Oh yeah, my bad. Yeah. Sorry, but yeah, I would love to get into the concussion trauma stuff, because I think a lot of people don't have much of an idea of how serious it is. I've sort of heard about it a little bit, but I know that it's a serious problem, and it can result in like lifelong injury for people.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, there's a lot of skeptical science. There's a lot of good science, but there's a lot of uncertainty right now about that, and there always really has been ever since I learned about it back in 2012. And that's really the root of it. Is I wanted to bring some clarity to this. I wanted to bring some understanding, and I wanted to help guys really know what they can and can't control in this situation. You've put your brain through, a lot of battles, and we're not sure exactly what the impact of that is. Yes, it's tied to suicide. Yes, it's tied to CTE. Yes, it's tied to depression, all these different things. Yet it's inconclusive whether that is directly responsible. Whether, as I started to look around, I realized that this was, yes, it was a head trauma issue, but it was also a life issue. There were a lot of athletes that just were not setting themselves up for success after sport. They were not emotionally regulating themselves. They didn't have an outlet for their passions and maybe even their anger after sport. And so when I really started to dive into it, I started to realize it's way more than just a head trauma issue. This is an athlete identity issue. It's a crisis in that. So that's how my passions really evolved. And what's interesting about my story, and I know you probably will want to ask this, is a lot of entrepreneurs end up, right, like really, turning their pain into purpose. So,
yes,
I mean, you could probably speak for yourself. My pain was actually having gone through it. I was not only a former athlete who, led with his head as a football player. My head was just banged, like my helmet was banged up, scratched up everywhere. And that was a badge of honor in a lot of locker rooms. Yet I was worried that I'd have long-term issues, just like everybody. I ended up having issues. I ended up having post-concussion syndrome about a year after my career ended. And that took me a while to figure out and diagnose and sort through, because it felt a lot like what everyone was describing as CTE. It felt like depression. It felt like mood swings. It felt like nausea. It felt like really just feeling disoriented in certain situations, kind of unexplainedly. And, it was a confusing time for me. So I started realizing I'm now the guinea pig for my own experiment, and I now get to start putting things together that are going to support me mentally and physically, that are also going to support other guys in my situation. So I found my niche, as you mentioned, really, out of passion. It's like, I want to help guys just like me who went through exactly what I did and are in my shoes. I want to help my teammates at the end of the day. Sure. So it just came naturally.
Yeah. And you hit on something really important right there at the end there. It's like, I want to help what I had, kind of thing. And that's so much what the coaching industry is about, is it's like, you only need to help someone that's one or two steps behind you. That's all you need. Right. And you can find everyone that you need, and you can be the perfect support they need, because if you're 10 steps ahead, it's not realistic. Like, the person you're trying to support just can't relate. And if you're right at the same level or below, I mean, that kind of speaks for itself. Like, it's kind of hard to support someone who's at your level or above you. So the 2 steps or so, which is right around where you kind of are, and you're really carving yourself out, is right there. So that's really, really cool and really powerful. So one of the things I was really again, that stuck out for me in your bio and just your story in general is you talk about how you had a mind shift that was sort of the catalyst to your transformation, right? Again, there was all these symptoms and all these lack of awareness of what it might be and so on and so forth. But then you had this big mind shift, right? And so I'm kind of curious, like, what was your mind shift before? And I especially want to know that because a lot of people might be there. And again, what's interesting about the symptoms you described, yes, that's like post-concussion syndrome and such, but it's also some standard emotional stuff that people go through. Like it's very relatable to a lot of people, right? And so I'd love to hear about sort of how and what you went through during those times. And then of course, sort of how did that catalyst hit you? How did you get to that mindset shift? And then of course, how it's evolved since then. So sort of like the before, when it happened, and then how it's been evolving since. I would love to hear about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great framework there. I think, in the beginning, it was definitely confusing, like trying to figure out what was normal life, having a desk job for the first time, working in a startup that was actually fighting the concussion crisis at the time. I was selling baseline concussion testing. And at the time, that was something that no high school athletic director or coach or many parents even wanted to talk about. They didn't want to talk about this topic.
Interesting.
Back in 2013, it just wasn't a big enough issue to put, kind of quote unquote insurance money behind it. And so, I was selling, I was getting so many no's, I was facing so much rejection. I wasn't sure what I was doing,
Pretty standard when you start in sales.
Yeah, I was starting in sales and I was at a startup. So I was creating the whole call script. I was creating, my whole strategy. And, a big thing that entrepreneurs face, and I want to really shout out to my former athletes, is, when given a structure and a set of goals and a framework for how to do things, we execute really, really well.
Totally.
In entrepreneurship and in life after sport, there's not a lot of structure. There's not a lot of goals. There's no scoreboard. There's no referees out there telling you when you're following the rules.
There's no real set rules. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a lot of athletes struggle with that. And I definitely did myself because, if I could go back, I wish I would have had a mentor. I wish I would have had some people that, and actually Northwestern really arms our student athletes really well with a mentor. I kind of wish mine would have been a little bit more along the entrepreneurial route. I really wanted and needed somebody that I could really trust, that was like me, that had the same interests, that had been there before, just like you talked about,
that's huge.
It's great, especially, when it comes to professionally, emotionally developing, like having a mentor is just so huge. And especially with, our kind of new age masculinity, like having someone that can demonstrate that in a unique way is really powerful. I digress a little bit but that's what I was really looking for back then. And I didn't really find it in my first job. I didn't have the structure. I didn't have any of those things. And so I was thinking to myself, is this just real life? Is this just how real life is? And all these frustrations, all these mood swings, all the headaches from looking at a screen all day, was that normal? Or was that explained by my post-concussion syndrome? And I started to realize after a while, after going to physical therapy for my eyes, PT for my neck and stuff, it was all connected. I started to realize that it was actually not a either or, it was a both and. And that was the most confusing part of it, was that it was a physical and a mental thing. There's this thing in the medical community called psychosomatics. A lot of psychologists will tell you that this exists. A lot of, this happens in every single study we do on medicines or pills. There's something called the placebo effect, right?
Right. Yes. Of course.
It's our minds basically telling us that our bodies are feeling better because we believe it, because we are thinking a certain way, because we have a growth mindset, right? Because we think that this is going to do something for us. And you can say that is part of that's mystical, right? Or you could say that part of that is like quantum physical in a lot of ways, right? And so, we could talk about the spiritual part of that. Like if you believe it, you can achieve it, right? And someone's got my back, right? There's a higher power. We can say that for another time. But I think that scientifically, proven is this placebo effect, that this does exist. And there is science to show how that does work. And so what I work in now in my work is really the psychosomatics. That's what helped me the most. Yes, I went and did the PT. Yes, I did the vision therapy. That was all supporting my symptoms kind of in an up and down wave form. But what really kicked me into high gear and literally set my symptoms down to the floor, and my eye doctor will tell you this firsthand, was me finally getting off my ass and starting a business.
Interesting.
Me finally giving up worrying about what people would think when I started talking about the hallowed CTE. I started poking the sleeping bear of the sports industry, you know? And I stopped worrying about that and stopped trying to people please, stopped trying to do it perfectly. You know, when I let go of perfection, when I let go of the judgment, that's when things really kicked into high gear and everything got better. My mood got better, right? When I was living on purpose and I was actually doing it, not just talking about it, not just thinking about it, Oliver. Like I had a 6-year corporate career, and it was only supposed to be 1 year. I was only going to go into the corporate world for a year and like try it out, you know, and like get back on my feet from that failed startup and then go and start my own company. But I never did it because I got in my head, you know, and I didn't have anybody there really looking and saying, "Hey, Q, you got this." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like I see something
more in you. Exactly. That's one of the number one things a mentor can do for you is see more in you than you see in yourself.
Yeah. And I was craving that real team atmosphere where someone could give me that feedback, like a teammate would, like someone like you would, right? Like a coach would, right? Who would say, "Hey, like I want you to be the leader of this team. I see what's possible if you're in the driver's seat. I believe in you. I want you to do this year," right? I was craving all of that, and thankfully, I was, you know, what did it for me. What really kicked me into high gear was a leadership and emotional awareness and emotional development program that I was put in, and it just. I thought I was going in there, like most things, kind of doing research for what guys like me would want, right? Or would help them. And it blew my will wide open. And it helped me really confront the ways that I was holding myself back, the ways that I was so worried about other people's opinions. And really I was confronted with this question of like, if it was over right now, how would I feel? Would it really be something worth writing home about? Would I really feel like I gave it my all? Or did I really hold everything back, you know? So
very interesting. Very interesting. There's definitely a few powerful things there. One of the things I'd love to touch on, you mentioned obviously about the whole placebo and psychosomatics. And one of the things I think that's for people who don't know this, and you probably know the percentage, but for a new drug to make it through and get approved, there's a percentage it needs to surpass in not having been successful through placebo. Do you happen to know how much that was off the top of your head by any chance?
You know, we could probably throw guesses. It's probably 10 or 20% of you know.
I think it's got to be like, I don't remember exactly what it is, but the fact that like the medical system recognizes that like, hey, this needs to work, or basically like there can't be more than this amount of percentage of placebo success, or else we cannot approve this drug. Right. Like we can't know that it's because of the drug kind of thing. And then that just speaks volumes. The fact that that's already recognized in the pharmaceutical industry and such. The other thing you lightly touched on, which actually perfectly transitions to another question that I was looking at asking you, is sort of the conversation around masculinity. And specifically, I noticed on your Instagram, that seems to be the theme lately, which is great, by the way. I love your Instagram. A lot of content around divine masculine and the reclaiming of it. I'd love to hear your story around like shadow and divine masculine and how your world relates to all of that. I feel like there's a box to open here around that conversation.
Oh yeah. There's part of my story that I sort of skipped over. I mentioned emotional awareness. That was my first step on the journey. One of my first steps. I would say my yoga teacher training back in 2015 was one of my first steps. And then it became, you know, every man in these men's groups that I started attending and leading and going to retreats and all these things. And that became a part of my work. But But I want to, backtrack and rewind back to my yoga teacher training. How the hell did a former D1 athlete, football player, 265-pound defensive end get into a yoga studio, right? Like it didn't make any sense.
Totally.
But really what it came down to was I had been in a hyper masculine environment for so long.
That's exactly what I was curious about.
And as a man that feels very balanced in his masculine and feminine, it never felt fully authentic. Like I could get up there and lead a room. I could lead a team to victory. We won the state championship when I was a senior in high school. I was like that high school Harry. Like I was also class president. Like I can do that, right? But my style of leadership is not control. It's not manipulation. It's not
micromanagement or anything like that.
Yeah. I like to lead by example. I like to lead from my heart. People say I lead from a place of authenticity. I lead from this is my heart on my sleeve, and this is who I am. This is where I'm at today. And there's something about that makes me human. A man can't have those aspects without having explored really his feminine nature. And I don't say feminine in a way of like being a female. I mean, or being a woman. We got to cut that out of our vocabulary, man. Like. Being feminine is a part of everyone. Every woman out there has masculine everything. Yes, perfect. And I like to use the word yin and yang, yet I would love for there to be some verbiage around this that we can use in modern day, right? That doesn't scream, female, and it doesn't scream, Eastern religion, when I say yin and yang.
Right, of course.
But for case in point, let's just use, for example's sake, let's use masculine and feminine. Right. A masculine quality, obviously, you probably have guests on here that talk about this a lot, right? Like masculine qualities are the direction. I like to think of an analogy I love is the frame in the box that surrounds the sandbox.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I would look at the sand itself and maybe the toys and the kids even the play and the joy. The sand itself is the feminine. You can't have one really without the other. You can have one without the other, but if you just have sand, you just have the feminine, all you'll have is sand and it will turn into dirt eventually. It'll just blend in and you won't have anything to play with.
There's just nothing that you can't exactly, right?
Yeah, you can't contain it. So the container is the masculine and it kind of alludes itself to that analogy of, holding space, which is a masculine quality, right? Mm-hmm. So the box of the sandbox is the masculine. That is it's the container, it's the structure, it's the vision. It's like, I want to make a sandbox and this is what I have to put around it in order to make the sand sit still. So I use that in saying that, we can't experience our full potential of playing with sand unless we have both of those things. We can't build a beautiful castle without both of those things. Mm-hmm. And to cut ourselves off from one is a huge disservice to us and what is possible, what's beautiful to build, right? So, to rewind again back to like my yoga teacher training, I was a former athlete who really wanted to express himself in a more free way. I wanted to be like sand. I wanted to be like water, and I wanted to no longer be forced, be required to lift a certain amount and weigh a certain amount and be a certain way and be in that structured environment. I wanted the exact opposite. And yoga, when I first took a class, I had a friend drag me into a class. That was the embodiment of the feminine. That was the freedom. That was, take this shape or take this one if it feels better for you. Listen to your body. Listen to what's coming up in your body. Listen to any emotions that are present for you. Listen, pay attention to those things. Don't just stuff them away for later, but actually use this moment right now to process it. Use this moment right now to experience everything that's going on. And I'm not saying we should live that way all the time, Oliver, right? Like I had to learn that myself too. It's not like this is one way to live and that's the other way. Everything in moderation, right? But I needed to experience that. I wanted that. And that, I don't think I was the only person, but I was one of the only people that would actually go to a yoga class as a former athlete. As a former macho guy. And that turned into more of a curiosity for why we were doing the things we were doing in class. And then I went to a yoga teacher training for the first time really ever invested in myself and my future learning, because up until then it was all scholarships. So it was cool to put some money down and say that I want to learn more about this and invest in myself. And that was a breakthrough of its own. And what I learned in that teacher training was way more than just yoga, like way more,
Totally.
If you've ever done yoga before, you know that,
Yes.
the way that we operate on the mat is the way that we often operate in life or in business or in relationship, And I rock climb now, and I can say that my friends, when I get them on the wall for the first time, they climb the way that they live, the way that they show up everywhere else.
Totally.
Like, it can be super
fearfully,
methodical,
aggressively, like.
Oh yeah, I have this one buddy who, like, this is the way he lives. He's always traveling. He used to work at Red Bull. He's just always on the go. He's an adrenaline guy, and when he's climbing that wall, you can hear it. You can hear it everywhere. He's hitting all the holds. Like he's banging against the wall. And that's a symbol for how we live, and that's all that is feedback, right? But I just started to realize that, this was an analogy and a representation of how I was living my life. And I was, how can I get more of this? And how can this actually apply to living the yoga? How can I live the yoga more? And, this might go, I can really extend this story on and tell more. But I'll try and shorten it. But basically, I was going to yoga, and I realized, like, I had a friend who actually was in recovery. And it came up that he decided that he was an alcoholic, and he started going to AA, and he started to really uncover some of these, things in his life that he really wanted to shift, through the big book and the 12 steps. And he started telling me about these things, and I'm like, this is so cool. Like, why doesn't this exist for regular old people like you and me? Or like,
right. Yeah.
Right. Like all of us. Like, why can't anybody just go into one of these meetings? He's like, you could, but obviously, maybe there are things like that. And eventually I found it. And what that was for me, at least at first, was men's groups. I found
that's what I was hoping you were going towards.
When I finally moved to San Diego, I was opened up to not the San Diego men's groups. Like, I think you get a different flavor anywhere you go, but a lot of people think men's work started in San Diego or on the West Coast. Like, it's actually in New York.
I never even heard that, but
okay. Start, cool. Right? But there's kind of a hotbed for sort of masculine embodiment and stuff here and like in Austin, right? But like, I basically, sorry, I kind of lost my place there.
No worries, man. It happens when we're flowing in many directions.
Yeah, but I basically realized, like, when I moved to San Diego, like I went to my first men's group. I went to my first men's retreat. It was an international retreat. It was through Everyman, and I started to realize, like, wow, this is like the real juice. And this is now I'm starting to realize, like, oh, now I'm actually piecing my life back together. I have this team environment. I have a little bit of feminine expression within this group where we're talking about our emotions, we're cutting the beer in sports, and we're talking about real life, and it felt like a really beautiful blend of the two. It felt like accountability. It felt like, a guy might get in your face and give you direct feedback and say something that you probably don't want to hear. Yeah. But I wasn't going to get that in many yoga studios. I wasn't going to get that in a lot of I would say in a boxless environment, and right. Just sand, And so I found that this was my version of a sandbox, my balance of it, and that's what informed my work. That's how I got to where I am now, right? Like you asked, I think your original question was, how did I end up doing yoga, or how did I end up like putting this all together with masculine and like divine masculine? I think that I really had to confront a lot of some of the toxic masculine parts of myself that was more ego driven. And of course, a lot of our mental struggles these days as men revolve around, I hate using the word, but that toxic masculinity, but really it's just shadow masculinity that it's a quality, it's gotten us this far, it's worked for us, but we don't have to take it so far, right? We don't have to take it all the way where money's the only thing, or providing is the only thing, or sacrificing our bodies and our mental state is the only thing.
Oh, and we're seeing how it's a detriment on everything, on the entirety of the planet, on the individual family, and all the things like where there's that disbalance of the sort of masculine do go next versus the feminine surrender flow B, there's these huge disconnects and lackings in men as a result. And so, yeah, I'm very happy we went in this direction, because it's a huge part of my belief as well. I've been in the same men's circle for over 2 years now, same 6 guys, only 6 of us. Like, just, it's really powerful. And I've, of course, been in other ones since then during this whole time, but that's been a huge part of the conversation. So, so super loving this. And one of the things that actually kind of came up for me when you were talking about the rock climbing and how it sort of shows what people do in life and so on and so forth, how they show up at the wall. This sort of thought came up. I was like, basically, anytime we do something that puts us into sort of a flow state where we don't use our mind, but we surrender to what our body knows it needs to do, is an opportunity to listen and see what we would do subconsciously. I was thinking about how cool that is, because that's, again, what, like, for example, the rock climbing, the yoga, the football, any of these things, anytime like you get to do something where you basically don't have the time to think, you got to just do.
Right.
And you see, and then if you're able to then at the same time, or again, have someone there to witness you, listen to how you're doing it, you can then relate that to every other area of your life. It's like, shit, like, again, like the guy who aggressively went up the wall, like, guaranteed he's showing up like that with his girlfriend and or kids, assuming he has any or not, or so on and so forth, right? And so I felt that was something that came up for me. I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I love that. And then something else I really want, or unless you want to jump on that.
No, go for it.
Yeah, because then I wanted to ask you a question in relation to, again, this conversation around masculinity, femininity. Oh, and then another analogy you might actually appreciate. I shared this with a lot of people, especially in business. I like to think of the whole masculine, feminine as water and riverbeds.
Yeah.
Right. And I love to, because I like to try to implement divine masculine into my clients and the work that we do with Beyond the Peak Consulting and so on. And how I like to talk about it is because a lot of people get sort of afraid of systems. When you bring systems into businesses, they feel constricted, right? Which would be like a shadow masculine sensation. But what I like to explain is like, well, no, but I want you to think about it as the fact of like, instead of being this random body of water that doesn't have any direction or any kind of flow, has so much power, but just is, versus creating these riverbeds that allow you to focus the water into a direction and truly move mountains, right? And so that's sort of what we like to do. And so, yeah, so all to say, how do you bring this masculine, feminine consciousness into both your own personal business, but then also into your clients? Because I'm sure that's a massive conversation with your clients that are mostly athletic. My God, like, I would love to hear what that kind of conversation's like. Yeah,
man, there's a couple of questions there. Like, one is like, how do I run my business, and how has it been for me to balance masculine and feminine in running a business? And there's also, I want to get to like, what are the conversations I have with, my athletes, and how does this affect them? So I think business wise, it's been one of the hardest things for me to do is to sit still, and actually like go on a walk and allow ideas to come to me. And allow inspiration to strike. Because, just like you said, I think we actually get into a flow state when we've done something so much and we've practiced it. When we've, just like I would on a football field, like I would get into flow states all the time. When I got that momentum, I hit my stride and, things are just flowing, right? Because I've done it a million times and I trust myself. But, in life after sport and building a business, like I just have never had that. And so I kind of defaulted to, let me muscle my way through this.
Totally.
And I think a lot of guys can relate to that. And probably a lot of business owners can too, where I had a 6-year corporate career. I was used to having, as an account manager, 5 or 6 calls a day on my calendar, half hour to an hour long. And my calendar was basically full of just meetings and meetings and meetings and doing and connecting, right? And it was so interesting how that just carried over. It was a habit of mine. So I just carried it over into what was next. I started having all these business development meetings with potential people that I could partner with, it was a blessing because over the first year of my business, I got to meet every single person in the personal development business who was also a men's coach, who also, or maybe they supported athletes, or maybe they supported current athletes. I got to learn about everybody and tell everybody my story.
Very cool. And to interject real quick, I think this is where it's like, this is a perfect example of where there are times where that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, it serves its purpose, right? It has its value. But again, it's that no one energy is sustainable on its own.
And it wasn't sustainable. It wasn't. It's the same thing that burnt me out and had me always feeling like I was being reactive to things in the corporate world. And it was always a big, complaint that me and my colleagues would have. We'd say, we're always doing reactive work. It never feels like we're doing anything proactive. And you're always asking us to hit these goals and do these things, but we never had the time or space to actually do it, and be proactive. And I realized I was doing that to myself in this environment, in this new entrepreneurial environment. And that's been one of the hardest things. But yes, there was a season where that was really important. And I realized I was getting burnt out by it, and I wasn't getting anywhere. I wasn't getting any momentum with the relationships that actually mattered, right? The ones that were effective. How can I hone those in and focus? And so really, actually, the last several months have been a big time focus of slimming back, like really going back into my like quote unquote cave and just like focusing on a few really important relationships, being very intentional with my time. Now that I've been in business for a couple of years, I know what works and I know what doesn't work, and that'll change, right? As we evolve. But right now is a season of, I would say it's more of that. It's not one or the other. It's not masculine or feminine, but I would say that it's more of a season of doing the work and focusing, and really actually more of that masculine kind of direction. Totally. And through that, by doing that, I'm able to block off all of Monday and half of Tuesday every week to devote to creating awesome content to put on my Instagram, to devote to, sending out an email once a week, to devote to going on a walk or going on a hike and using that as creative time to think of new ideas and start dreaming, right? So many of us don't dream very often because we don't even give ourselves the time and space to go do it, just to be.
Or sometimes there's even the contradictory point of like, you don't have time to dream because you're so focused on one dream. You've made no space for any others.
That's a great one. That's been a big lesson I've had to really learn too. And we can speak into seasons there as well, right? Like for the last year, I tell my friends, or the last 2 years, I tell my girlfriend, I tell my friends, like, man, I feel like I'm finally coming up for air after the last 2 years. And it was a season of just like having my nose down. I'm not taking many trips. I'm not visiting many people. I'm not calling many people like I used to. And that's been helpful. It's been good. I think that's been healthy, right? But it's also led to like some of those relationships kind of burning out or just losing their flame, right? And so that's been a new focus of mine, right? Is bringing balance back to that. And I think that this all comes with doing and trying and seeing what works. And we can't overthink our way into doing it. I overthought it for forever, worrying that I would do it wrong, or I would lose this identity or this relationship, or I would do it wrong, or I would fail, or I would lose money, right? Or what if it gets too big, You just got to go do it. And that was the hardest thing for me to hear. I heard it like a broken record when I was like wanting to be an entrepreneur. And that's all the advice I basically got was just start, just start.
Yeah.
But it's so true, man. Like once you get started, you learn and you learn and you learn from experience, and none of it's failure. None of it's failure. It's all lessons. It's all feedback for you. And
so I think the line I've heard in that is like one of my favorite lines. It's like, it's not a failure as long as you learn. Yeah,
exactly. I'd say that feedback is a gift. We've talked about, like, feedback in men's groups, feedback from a coach or a boss. It's a huge gift. Seek it out, find it, and failure, going out and trying something is a way to give yourself feedback. It's a gift. So it's just information.
Yeah. I'd love to actually personally speak into the feedback thing a little bit, because I think that there's a very important conversation to be had where people are having a tough time making sure that their ego's in check such that they can actually create a space where feedback is welcomed. Because that's a big thing that I have really worked on a lot. And I think there's never going to be a time where you fully eliminate your ego, because the reality is ego is truly at the right time necessary and powerful and useful and all the things. Yeah. And it can, of course, also be a very bad curse where if your ego is too much in the way, people will not feel welcome or invited to give you feedback at all. So it's one thing to like, even like, I'm open to feedback. Yeah. But like, are you truly deeply open to it, whether good, bad, terrible, whether it's not said the right way? Because like, and you as a coach, right, you probably, you understand how to give good feedback in a way that doesn't harm, right? It's like kind of the coach sandwich, like here's something good, here's the feedback, here's something good, right? Yeah. But not everyone knows how to do that. And in fact, most people don't. And so what I would love to really close this little thought on is like, you get better at opening yourself up, no matter what or how it's said. If it's said, there's truth to be found in there. And it is like your sovereignty and like your opportunity to just hear the feedback through the how it was said, but what was it truly? I think there's just so much there, man.
That's that hits everything home, really. Like that's a meta way of talking about life, like if we can, be in a relationship and just like take life, its events, how we interact with people, if we can take it for what it is and not what our ego wants it to be. We always talk about, I hear it said a lot that what we see is just a mirror of what we see in ourselves. Yep. Exactly. So reflection. Our thoughts are reflected in the world. And so I think the practice is constantly to stay in here and really retrain these thoughts and how we talk to ourselves, because it really starts here. And that frames how we see the world and how we might view someone saying something would trigger the ego version of me. But the true self version of me, the authenticity version, would meet that with compassion. Might walk away, right? but I'll meet that with compassion. I'll take it in, and can I take that information for what it is, and can I have it land, or decide, okay, that's not useful information for me? And I think everyone gets to make that decision. Yes. You don't have to take everyone's feedback. You don't have to take everyone's advice. Quite frankly, I don't think we need everyone's advice. You know, so I think you hit the nail on the head. Like if we can master that, we master everything. If we can take information for what it is without having an emotional trigger, having an emotional reaction, I think that really starts with facing ourselves with compassion so that we can face outside with compassion. Yeah. So now this other question I had that you already pretty much answered, but I'd love to see if maybe you have expansion on it. Basically, as a professional athlete and as you stepped into your coaching career and even the corporate job and all those things, you've probably had to overcome a lot of fears and a lot of I can't do this mentality, mindset kind of thing, right? And again, you've already sort of spoken to this about, just do it. But I'd love to see if you have more to say about like what could someone learn from you about how to overcome limiting beliefs about their self-worth or their self-confidence and really take massive action no matter what. I would say that's the magic question, Oliver. Like, I mean, I don't like to put blanket answers on things, especially things like this. People sometimes ask me, like, how do you, confront your abundance mindset? Like, that's something I'm still working on. You know what I mean? Sure. I don't think there's a one solution for everybody. Just like you wouldn't give everybody the same workout, you wouldn't give everyone the same advice. I think certain things work for certain people. I think, and I also don't want to be cliche about this, but I will tell you what has worked for me.
Totally.
Number one
is all we can ask.
I would say number one is actually seeking that feedback, because in that feedback, I might get a lot of uncomfortable stuff. But if I'm bold enough to go out and seek feedback and seek friendships with people that will actually confront my ego and see it for what it is, If I surround myself around the people that will actually do that, actually go to town, go to work with my ego, then that means they're also going to call me forward, and they're also going to see me for who I am, see me for everything that's not working, and also see what is working or what can work. And that's what I'm really getting back to in the beginning, which is like having someone that will actually confront you and tell you like, yo, like everyone's looking at you for the solution. Like everyone trusts you right now. You're the one that doesn't trust yourself. You're the one that is having all these limiting beliefs, letting letting the voices in your head of someone's old perspective or your story about what someone thinks about you, you're letting that get in the way. So number one, it's having a third party perspective to see you. And, you can do that a million different ways. Hopefully you have really good friends in your corner. Hopefully you have a support system, a family. I think that's the best, right? That's the most ideal place. Sometimes it doesn't come from there. Sometimes it comes from a men's group or a friend. Maybe it comes from hiring a coach, hiring a therapist, surrounding yourself with those types of people. And I would say that was the number one thing for me, but there was always more room to grow. And to get cliche, over the last 6 months, I've really been exploring my own relationship with a higher power, with a trust in something bigger than just me. And I could say that higher power is within me, right? I could say that, that is me, the true me, but really trusting that is true and that has always been there and that will always be there. And I can always come back to that and ground into who I am, right? And a higher power, if that's what you believe in, right? I don't often talk about this, but I've also tried microdosing. That's been really helpful for me to get in contact.
That's fully available on this podcast. Yeah, don't worry, we're advocates for sure.
Yeah, so I tried microdosing in the last few months, and the intention of it was not to get high. I don't think many people do that, especially these days.
That's the difference, right? It's using it as a medicine, not as a party tool.
Yeah, and what it's done for me, I haven't taken one in 3 or 4 weeks. But what it's done is I took it intentionally to help me connect with that higher power, help me connect with myself more, help me really ground down into my sense of confidence. Because when we know who we are, we trust ourselves, and confidence equals trusting ourselves. So really, it just came down to a few tricks like that. I think psilocybin really helps us. It is a tool. It's nature's tool to help us tap into that, and we don't need it. I don't think anyone needs that, but I think if it's
there's a lot of discussion around how of course you can tap into that with many practices such as deep and higher level meditation or breathing, heavy breathwork exercise. I mean, Corey and Jessica, right? They're close friends of yours. Yeah. They do exactly that. And however, I think the argument is more just that this is a tool that, especially if maybe you aren't practicing the ways of doing that in these non-psilocybin supported ways, this is a bit of a, for lack of a better word, a shortcut to it sort of thing, right? But it's what can be needed to sort of trigger into or be the what's it called, the catalyst to so much more, right? And something I even like to think about, the ego armor in a sense, where it's like you build up this egoic armor kind of thing to protect you from all the things out there. That's typically what the ego is there for, to protect you. And once you start chipping away at it and making those little bit of cracks, it's a lot easier to open up a crack and actually break the armor when there's even the littlest bit of a crack than when there's none, right? The strength it takes to make a crack versus expanding it to actually break the armor entirely is much, much more. And so when I think about it, I'm like, if I can use, let's say psilocybin just to make the crack, and then from there I can push that crack further with or without, but again, trying to emphasize the without, that's the goal.
Yeah. I love that analogy. It's kind of like when we think about the brain, right? There's a million different neural connections that could take place. There's potential for which part of my brain to connect. And actually psilocybin releases kind of like the default mode network, which is like the control center. And it allows things to literally move and connect in ways that they wouldn't otherwise. That's why, if you take a trip, you could see color, or I'm sorry, you could see sound, you could visualize, different things, right? It's because different parts of your brain are talking that wouldn't normally. And I think that, that potential is always there. It's just there are things that can support you in noticing that that's possible.
Yes.
It's almost like a placebo for our life, right? Like we can,
yeah.
It's like, it's just a reminder, like, this is possible, guys. Like, we can do this, like, I would say that psilocybin acts like that. It's kind of like a coach. It's like, your brain can do this. Your brain can get across from here to there, in no time. You don't need this and all that other stuff. Like, you can do it, right? And I don't know, like, why wouldn't you? I always say this: you can do it alone, but like it's a lot easier and a lot more fun if you do it with a team.
Totally. Yeah, and actually, I'd love to even just quickly attempt a part of an answer to the why wouldn't you. I think one of the big reasons people don't is fear of potential, right? Fear of change, fear of unknown. These things, right? Like, I'm comfortable here. I know what this is. I'm afraid to see what might be on the other side. What if it's worse? What if it's better? Right? That's a big one. I think a lot of people don't talk about is like the fear of something being better than it is and the change that might come associated, and if they're even ready for that. Very, very cool stuff. One of the thing. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, that's very real. So I lost my mom when I was a kid. So I was 15 when my mom passed away, pretty suddenly from a stroke. And
that's rough.
It's almost like, relationship wise or love wise, it also correlates to like business and, stepping up and having a deep sense of connection with people, right? That there's a fear there because the rug was pulled from underneath me, right? Some athletes experience this with like losing their career through injury, right? Maybe they were going to make it to the NFL and they had that rug pulled from underneath them. Everyone has traumas. And I think that to relate this back to your point, I think that, there's a hesitation sometimes to go after something bigger and to have it be really, really great and to have that chance to go back to the NFL in your life or to have your mom back, right, in some other way, right, for it to be really great, because there's a fear that it might get taken away, often. So we have to be willing really to be heartbroken again. We have to be, in order to achieve real success, we have to be willing to be heartbroken. And that is really that's the risk that we really take when we go and play big.
Very cool. Very cool, man. Well, we're coming somewhat close to the end here. So I definitely want to, really honor you and ask you a couple other last sort of questions. First of all, like what's next for you and your business world class? What's sort of the next phase or the next step, or what do you foresee for it?
Well, I run some group programming right now that I think is some of the most powerful stuff guys can experience, specifically former athletes who would be much less prone to join a group like you and I, right? My programming gets guys introduced to this sort of work in a really practical, simple way. And I had guys join it last night, and we did like a full men's group for the first time. I give them a few tools on this like online module, and they showed up and they were all like really hesitant. They were all really nervous.
It's so fun though. Once they experience it, man, you see their eyes open up. Oh God, that's the best.
Yeah. And, throughout the process, I'll drop like some more like teachings, and we'll talk on certain topics, and there'll be more things that come up, and guys will evolve. But like what the shift I saw from the beginning of that session to the end of it in less than 2 hours was like, these guys are all like, wow, I'm like really excited about this. Like, I really like this. I'm really pumped about this. And we were talking about stuff that most guys would never want to talk about, when on the skin of things. And so that sort of work is, I kind of correlated to like going to the gym, you don't want to do it, but once you go do it, you always feel better, right? Having that uncomfortable conversation, once you do it, you always feel better. And I'm trying to help guys feel better after sport. And so the group programming is what I'm really passionate about. I've tested it and really proven it with, gotten some great testimonials, gotten some great results from it with a lot of former athletes. And my goal is really to get this into current and former athletes' hands at several universities across the country. But I really got to be careful. I got to, just like you mentioned, really, zero in while also seeing the bigger picture. My focus is really getting this out to as many guys as I can. And so right now, I know you might ask me, I have I have a free offering, which is it's called the Life After Athlete Archetype Quiz. It's a great little primer to get guys that are former athletes a bit of a taste for like, what's your archetype in real life? How do you show up in real life? Are you the captain on the team that's the quarterback? Or are you like, are you the guy who's going to take the microphone? Or are you the guy who's maybe the offensive lineman who isn't as outspoken on the team? And how can you, once you notice that and you realize kind of how you want to be and who you are, which this test really gives everyone, what are the steps you can take to be a captain? You know, because you can be a captain on any team from any position. You don't have to be the star quarterback to be the captain. Everyone knows that. There's 4 captains, 5 captains on the team. Even a special teams captain in the NFL. So what's your role? How do you fit in when it comes to leadership after sport? And how can you optimize that so that you can be the captain of your life and the captain of your team? So that is called the Life After Athlete Archetype Quiz. That gives you a sense of essentially how you fit into potentially a group of mine, into life after sport, into career after sport. And you can find that by going to q-williams.com/quiz.
Yeah, we'll have that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, /quiz.
Very cool.
But yeah, that's the vision, is really get this into, as many men's hands as possible. I also offer one-on-one coaching, which I usually have a couple of spots open. Right now I'm getting a little full, but always have flexibility to have conversations with guys that really want to take it to the next level and really take themselves on for a little while. Yeah.
Amazing. And then what's the best place to find you? I imagine it's probably your Instagram. Is there other like magic places?
Yeah. I would say Instagram's a great place to start. It's kind of it's a good business card for me. It gives you a really awesome look at everything I do, and it links you out to everything that I offer as well.
Totally. And just last thing, man, open mic. Is there anything that you'd like to leave with, again, either our audience or just with any man that might be hearing, or again, even maybe a woman needs to hear something in relation to all this kind of stuff? What would you like to leave the audience with?
Well, we're filming this right now during Men's Wellness Month. Basically, it's Movember, right? A lot of guys grow out a mustache. I had one guy on our call last night grow out a mustache, and I think a lot of guys do that, because it's fun, and maybe it's like check your balls for prostate cancer once in a while. But I'm really taking a spin on it this month and really focusing on the mental side of things. Men account for 3.5 times the suicides compared to women. 1 in 10 men feels depressed but doesn't ask for support. Men are, by and large, massively affected by thoughts of anxiety and depression, and they don't seek out the support. They don't have outlets. They don't have that.
Or they're negative outlets, right? They're vices potentially.
Yeah. And so, my message really is to guys that there are guys out there for you. It's not just about relying on your partner. That there are other outlets. There are guys out there that want the same things that you do. And I think the biggest risk, I'm going to be sharing a lot more about this. I think one of the biggest risks we can take is really connecting with a man eye to eye. I think that there's a lot that comes with that. There's trust that gets built when you connect with a man eye to eye. Start to notice yourself when you show up and you meet someone for the first time, or maybe even some of your longtime friends. How much eye contact do you share with them? Do you really trust them? Do they have your back? Do you have their back? And I think that's a really good tool. We talked about feedback. It's a great, step of feedback to kind of give you perspective and information on how you trust other men. And if you get uncomfortable, holding eye contact with a man, that's information for you.
100%. Love that.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much for being on this episode. Really, really appreciate everything that you spoke about today, but even more particularly of what you're doing out there. It's definitely what the world needs. And again, I love the specificity of it being towards athletes, because although this is needed arguably in every industry and category and all the things, if someone was going out and trying to do it for everyone, it's hard to get anyone to listen. And you're just like, no, I'm going to help these people, and I'm going to really help them step into their divine masculine and all the other things that you're doing. But love it. All for it. Huge supporter. And thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Oliver. This has been great. Loved it, man.